So how do you get closer to God? Let's talk about it. This is Bite Size Theology. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bite Size Theology, a ministry of Springfield First, where we tackle big topics around faith, one bite at a time. I'm your host, Allison Means, and today I am joined by Justin Snyder, and we are talking about practical ways to get closer to God.
Yeah, so just click on videos like this.
Doctors hate these 3 simple tricks.
Right.
Yeah. We've done it. You're welcome.
Probably YouTube and the internet's full of those kinds of videos,
I'm sure.
So we should just join right in. But yeah, it's an important question though, because so many of us want to know, how do we grow in God? Or if we feel like we're in a season of dryness or stuckness, it's like, okay, what do we do?
Right.
So, what do we do?
So what do we do, Justin?
Well, I like a quote from Dallas Willard, who once said something to the effect of, God is always waiting for us, not the other way around. So that gives me comfort that any gesture, any movement, any posture towards God is one in which God will be there with us. I think for many of us, though, it's not getting bogged down or too immediately concerned with results, because we live in a very result-oriented culture.
Oh,
like
yes.
We're always thinking about, okay, what am I getting out of this? Like even people probably watching this video right now, it's like, this going to be worth my next few minutes or not? Like we're always constantly judging, is this worth my time? When we import that mentality to spiritual formation and growth, that can lead to some bad things. It doesn't lead to much growth if we're always judging, what am I getting out of this? Am I getting something out of this passage or this practice or what? Right.
If you're trying to gauge like the worthiness of like different parts of the Bible, you're kind of spinning your wheels.
Right. So we just have to take a longer view, I think. But in my own devotional reading this fall, I've been reading slowly through this famous work called Revelations of Divine Love by Julian of Norwich, who was one of the few female voices we have from the Middle Ages, so 14th century in what is southern England today. And she lived, some say she was widowed, but she lived in a kind of a solitary life by herself, but she had this reputation of being a very holy person. And she was struck with a very serious disease. She had a near-death experience, and she lived through it. And during this experience, she had these showings or these images of the love of Jesus. And when she survived the ordeal, she wrote about them. And so now that's the book that we have. And so I've just been reading through this book really slowly this fall. And one thing that reminds me of is like when we go for spiritual advice and we ask for spiritual advice, I think the most important insights come from people who have stuck with the faith and maybe lived through some real stuff, like got through some seasons of hardness. Like I would caution people, maybe be wary of people who just like to talk and tell you spiritual tips. Find people who have lived through some stuff and maybe even lived through some hardship. And it's just been really insightful to hear about what she wrote. But anyway, can I read a passage?
Oh, please.
All right. So at one point, she's talking about how we grow in God, and seeking is a very important practice, so that we are always seeking, and seeking God is very important. But at one point she says this: there is nothing very special about seeking. It is a thing that every soul can do with God's grace, and to do with the common sense and teaching of the church. God's will is that we should do 3 things in our seeking: that by his grace we should seek with deliberation and diligence without slacking, and do it moreover gladly and cheerfully without moroseness or melancholy; that we should wait steadfastly on him in love and never grumble. And then she goes on to say that we trust in him wholeheartedly and confidently. This is his will. So I would summarize that as any spiritual practice that's worth the time doing and that has the potential to form us deeply will include from us diligence, gratitude, and trust. I don't know. What do you think?
Diligence, gratitude, and trust. I mean, those feel like, things that we're like, I can kind of do those, right? They don't seem too lofty or too far off. Like diligence, just have some discipline about it, right? Gratitude, that's just something that's going to enrich your life regardless. And there's a lot to be grateful for when you stop and look for it. The trust, I think, is the hardest one. The trust is the hardest one because I think we are naturally grasping at control.
Yes. And we can bring that into this idea of I want to grow in God this year, and I've got to have control over it.
I'm going to do it.
It's my work.
I'm going to follow 5 steps.
Yeah.
And
Right. But that's why I found this so powerful is that she's saying, well, if you can bring diligence and gratitude and trust, then it almost doesn't matter which practices you pick for your life to build up your life in God. The grace or the gospel allows us to grow in any number of ways. But if we bring those things, for me, it's like it takes the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not about, okay, should I be reading this book of the Bible or should I be doing this? Well, pick something, but do it with diligence and gratitude and trust. And I don't know, I've found that helpful recently in my life.
Yeah, I really like that as a way to frame growth in your relationship with God.
Yeah. So if someone's clicking on this video now and thinking like, okay, it's the end of the year, or maybe we're watching this at the beginning of the new year even, and it's like, what do I do? I really want to grow in God. I think listening to people like Julian is really helpful. Like, first of all, what are you seeking? Knowing yourself is so important because and pastors are sometimes notorious for giving spiritual advice that will work for some people, but it's going to miss a lot of people too. We're speaking at different levels, or we're not quite at, how God unlocks something in one life might not be like it happens in another life.
Right. It's not really a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's why I'm wary of maybe just handing out platitudes about spiritual formation and stuff. But all that said, that if we can take these simple practices or find a practice that we can do with diligence, gratitude, and trust. So for example, prayer. Let's say if this coming year we want to grow in prayer. That is a wonderful way that people can grow in the faith. And yet prayer is such a huge topic, but I guess I would say pick one prayer practice to center your life in for a time being, whether it's in the morning, night, whatever. But do it regularly, so deliberately.
Yes.
Do it with gratitude and do it with trust. And leave the results to God.
Right. It may not be actually very helpful for yourself to be like, I want to be able to pray for 1 hour every day by May. Like,
yeah,
that's maybe not the best way to approach it.
Right. And so many spiritual teachers in the Christian tradition are always like, or are often like, be very wary of, those kinds of like getting quick results and feeling good about them. That's probably blinding us to other things in other words, so don't take a lot of stock, put a lot of stock into our spiritual successes, but just keep returning to that growth in relationship with Christ with diligence, gratitude, and trust. I think that could be an important word as we go into the new year.
I think also it's important to bear in mind that your faith journey is not necessarily linear.
No, right.
You're not going from point A to point B. That like life throws a lot of curveballs at you, and things are not always a straight line.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in those seasons of difficult things or where you feel like dry, there's a lot to be gleaned from that time, especially if you are continuing to be diligent and approach it with gratitude and trust God through those.
Which is why I love the church so much, because chances are you will eventually meet somebody within the church who has lived through some tough moments with those three things, and we can learn a lot from people like that, like Julian, 800 years ago or whatever it was, to not quite 800, but or to the people you're sitting by in church who have grown in faith, have not abandoned their faith in hard times, and might have something to teach us about how we can grow even through harder times.
Absolutely. That's a lot to think on and spend some time with.
Yeah. So I just say, I would just encourage people, find one practice right now, something maybe you've done before, maybe it's a newer practice, whether it's prayer, scripture reading, journaling, fasting, and do it with those three things: gratitude, trust, and persistence or diligence. And then stick with it.
And see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah.
But don't get too hung up on results.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Justin. This has been a really lovely time together, and we hope that you'll join us on the next one. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Bite Size Theology, where we take big ideas about faith and break them down one bite at a time. We hope today's conversation has helped you grow in your understanding and sparked new insights on your journey of faith. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And as always, if you have questions or you want to dive deeper into today's topic, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep growing.